The suicide rate for young males, teens and young adults, 13 to 25, on average is 0.4%. Which is actually, if you think about it, quite high. That's 4 in every 1,000. If we narrow that group down and say LGBT teens and young adults, male, the suicide rate is 6%. It's 15 times higher. It's one of the highest suicide rates of any group. And if that doesn't worry you, there's something seriously wrong. We're going to look at some of these suicides. Details of some of them. They're real. These are real kids that have killed themselves. And we're going to see an alarming trend developing. We'll look at why, perhaps in another video. And we will look at the wider implications, certainly. It seems to be bullying is the main problem. Bullying happens everywhere. It happens on the streets. It happens in church. That's worrying. It happens in youth club. That's worrying. It happens at school. And we're going to see just how worrying that really is. One of the most effective ways of reducing this suicide rate is supportive parents. If the parents are supportive, the chances of suicide are greatly reduced. They're not reduced to zero. Again, we will find that out, but they are greatly reduced. Nicholas jumped from a bridge because the school failed to address homophobic bullying. Note that school failed to address homophobic bullying to the extent that Nicholas felt that the only option was to jump from a bridge. If you jump from a bridge, this isn't a cry for help, it's an attempt to end your life. Depending on the height of the bridge, success can be guaranteed. Jean-Philippe, he hanged himself. He was conditioned by society that you had to be heterosexual. Anything other than heterosexual was inferior, worth less or worthless, depending on the extreme. Worth less, not worth as much as a heterosexual, or just worthless, having no value at all. And that's obviously how he felt, because he hung himself and society let him. Carl Joseph Walker Hoover. A particularly sad case. He hung himself because the school, yet again, failed to address homophobic bullying. That's really sad because he was 11. And the school allowed the persecution, presumably by other students, although there are cases, which we are not going into detail, there are cases where the teachers have joined in the bullying of gay students, who have then subsequently committed suicide. So it's not just the students. And if it was, why didn't the teachers do something about it? Carl was 11 years old. Carl did not identify himself as gay. Apologies for the pronunciation. Yahim Harora. He hanged himself. There's a strong suspicion it was school bullying that drove him to do it. And he didn't associate himself as gay either. And he was 11 years old. 2 children, both 11, neither of whom identified as gay, driven to commit suicide by school bullying and school failing to address it. That is not the way a school should run. And I have quite a bit of experience of schools. Now, Bill Clayton, this is one we know quite a lot about, and it's going to be severely abbreviated. There's pages and pages on Bill. It's a very, very detailed history of his life that I've drawn a few highlights from. Bill Clayton came out as bi at the age of 14. You know what his parents did? They loved him. It made no difference. They were very, very supportive. And his school were quite good as well. And they worked with his parents. And yeah, you suddenly, having been hidden in the closet, you suddenly pop out and you know, it must feel like all the world's staring at you. And they got him some support. They found a group that supports young people who are going through whatever hell it must be to go through. I have no idea. I've never had to do it. And he was sexually abused by one of his support workers. That ain't going to do him any good at all, is it? Really? I mean, that's just. He was a gifted student. And we will step on a bit, and the guy was arrested. He was prosecuted, and yeah, it wasn't all right. Of course, it wasn't. Not for Bill. Might have been all right in the eyes of the law, but for Bill, life was hard. He had to live with it. And he went out with a couple of friends, a boy and a girl. I don't know if they were gay. It doesn't seem so. It doesn't read as if they were gay. Let's put it that way. It seems that they were straight and they were going out with their bisexual friend, and everything was sweetness and light. You know, they didn't care. Great. That's how friends should be. Except some people who weren't friends came along, and they were subject to a very brutal homophobic attack, which left all three in hospital for an extended period and requiring counselling after for post-traumatic stress disorder. You carry scars like that. At the age of 17, Bill was dead. And that's because everywhere he turned, there was hate. And the love of his family, and it is a heartbreaking story to read. His parents will never recover from the loss of their son. Not their bisexual son, just their son, their beloved Bill, because they didn't care. He was their son. Robbie Kirkland, he was 14, and he didn't cry for help. He stole the keys to his father's gun cabinet, opened it, took one of the guns, went out and blew his own head off. Why? He couldn't face being gay in a straight world. And we hear this again. We will hear it again shortly. We hear this again. We will hear it again shortly. We're going to hear it now. Because Bruce, at the age of 21, jumped 450 feet off a bridge, I assume, or off a cliff. He jumped 450 feet. There's a problem with jumping 450 feet. You're not going to survive. That wasn't a cry for help. The other problem with jumping 450 feet is there is a finite but certainly measurable amount of time between jumping and hitting the ground. There is time enough to think. There is time enough to change your mind. I really hope he didn't. I really hope he got what he wanted. Because to change his mind, those last few fractions of a second would have been absolutely unbearable. I've been in a couple of car accidents. It ain't funny. And the thought, knowing without a doubt that you're going to die and you don't want to anymore and it's your own doing, no matter how short a time it was, that is a torment no one should go through. And don't think that jumping from 450 feet is okay. It's not like the films. It's not like the cartoons. You're not Homer Simpson. You don't hit the bottom, say ow and get up. You're not Daffy Duck. You're not Bugs Bunny. You're not Wile E. Coyote. When you hit the bottom, you burst. like dropping a bag of jelly from the multi-storey car park. That is what happens to the human body when it hits the ground at nigh on 120 mile an hour. There is little that is recoverable. That is not fit for the parents to view. They don't get to say goodbye. And lastly, Justin, he hung himself through school bullying. I don't know what is going on in these schools. If they are deliberately turning a blind eye to a difficult situation, to the little puff being bullied, well, we're not very keen on that sort of thing anyway. We'll just brush it under the carpet. And then that little puff goes out and hangs themselves. The school, as far as I can see, should be culpable. They have aided the tormenting to death of one of their students, and it doesn't matter whether they're gay or not. It really doesn't. They have aided, by failing to act, they have aided the bullying of one of their students to the point that that student died. Now, if you bully someone to the point that they die, are you guilty of murder? If you drive someone to commit suicide, are you guilty of murder? Who's in charge in these schools? Oh, well, presumably the head teacher. Fails to address it. Child dies. Is the headmaster or headmistress or whatever, principal, not guilty of murder? It was preventable and they did nothing to prevent it.